Welcome to Unleash Your Audacious Confidence on Win-Win Women TV. This show is all about sharing the tips, tools, and techniques that will allow you to step boldly in the direction of your dreams despite your feelings, fears, or past failures, to imagine what's possible for yourself and live the life you deserve. Welcome to this episode of Unleash Your Audacious Confidence on Win-Win Women TV. I'm your host, Alicia Couri, and on today's show, we have an amazing guest, Alloysa, and she's going to talk to us about trusting transition. Before we get to our guest, I just want to encourage you to go check out winwinwomen.com. There's a store, and this is the season, so go check out the store. There are gifts there for the holidays, for birthdays, anniversaries. You'll find some really great gifts there on the Win-Win Women store. You'll find that at winwinwomen.com. And if you want to connect with me, go on to alicia360.com and you can connect with me on all social media platforms. And I encourage you to do that. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/c/Alicia Couri, and you'll get all of these wonderful shows, including a lot of other content. I'm so excited to get to our next guest. She's an author, a speaker. She's also an abuse survivor, and she has multiple programs to help you overcome your own trauma and abuse. She's a life coach, and I'd love to welcome to the show, Alloysa. Welcome to the show, Alloysa. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
So, trusting transition is our topic, and typically we teach from a place of what we've experienced. We teach out of our own experiences, and as I said a moment ago in reading your bio, that you're a life coach, but you also help people through trauma. So can you give us a little bit of your background as how you came to be where you are today, helping other women?
Absolutely. So to give you a little background about me, I'm from New York, Brooklyn, New York, and my parents' Trinidadian background. And unfortunately, it wasn't the best family situation. So I know a lot of people listening probably could relate to me. It was a lot of physical abuse, a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of fighting, and just a mismanaging of communication. I think on both ends, everyone was trying to be heard, but back then we didn't have the tools and the resources needed to do that in a healthy and beneficial and effective way. And unfortunately, when you have a bad foundation, like a parental structure that doesn't know how to do that well, everyone else who is trickling down, such as me, the children, are affected by that. Yeah. So that has kind of been my childhood experience, adolescent experience. But I always knew inside of my heart and soul, like, there has to be a better way. This cannot be the end. This can't be how the rest of my life is going to go. And this cannot be my future for my family as well. So yeah, that's so important. That's really important to have that foresight. Like, I'm going through it, but there's got to be a better way. And it's so interesting that you say that as a child, thinking there must be a better way. Not everybody has that clarity to think through that, and seek out a better way. What do you think gave you that perspective? Even if you could answer that question, I don't know. Yeah, I definitely think, one, it was God. He has been a huge influence and the reason for my life and purpose. And also exposure. I think that when you're kind of secluded in your household and your neighborhood and your norm, you think that's the only way. But where I really started gaining exposure is college. So I picked a school as far away from New York that I was allowed to go. That's Arizona State. And I was like, I need to get out of here. So I went to school on the West Coast, and I had a lot of great friends. We happened to all be September birthdays. And so we had a lot in common. And most of all,
I met different family structures. I met different types of parents. I met different types of friends. Like I've never really had a good support system. So I'm seeing that, I mean, maybe they might not get along all the time, but they're not fighting and cursing and having the type of environment that I was used to. They were nice to me. I didn't have a car. They would give me a ride. We would cook together. I really
like,
felt,
what is this?
yeah. I was like, this exists. This is real. This is like TV. So realizing slowly but surely, like my norm was actually abnormal. And meeting different people from different walks of life, it exposed me to there has to be a different way, and there is a different way. And how can I get there? So that kind of pushed me into where I am today and was a foundation for the change and like the epiphany to walk towards that light and kind of change the darkness that I've come from.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's very profound, because even that, I remember a friend telling me that their dysfunctional household, like their children had normalized it. It was so normal for them that when a friend came over and saw certain things, they were like, "Oh, why are you guys doing it why is that happening? That's not normal." And it was only until then did her daughter start questioning, "Is this abnormal?" So sometimes it's really important to allow your children to be exposed to a lot of different things, not everything, but just so that they can start to see a better life for themselves, or see a different way for themselves that can bring them to where they want to go. Okay, I don't want to meddle too much around that, but what really made the shift for you in overcoming some of the traumatic the trauma that you went through as a child and adolescent?
Well, it definitely was a mix of two things. Stepping back a little bit, I grew up in church. Always knew to go to church, always thought that, there was a God and there was a better way, but I was very churched, but I was never really exposed to having a relationship with God. So as I got older, and I changed churches, and again, more exposure to different people, different churches, different groups, different support, I realized one, the support is a huge factor in your growth. Having a different outlook on life and also having people that support you who are healthy. So it's hard to do this by yourself. So definitely the support from my godly background. Also, I've always had a huge hunger for learning. I'm always reading a book, going to a group, a conference, watching a sermon. I'm very into learning. And I started learning about gaslighting and physical abuse, verbal abuse, childhood abuse. I really started researching and learning that on my own. And it opened my eyes to that was my experience. And I think, like I said, going back to not having the parental structure that knows about those things, that was probably what they went through, and definitely what they went through in their childhood, probably going back 3 and 4 generations with the same thing.
They just repeated the same behavior. So you're like breaking that cycle through education, through really looking at it as this is not normal. There must be a better way. And that's how we start to break that cycle, having that awareness. Wow.
Education and exposure. And I would say it's so hard to have all that pressure on you. Like, I have to be the change. I'm going to do it. It was a lot of backlash, to tell you the truth. There was a lot of family members going against me. It was a lot of friends, not turning their back, but me having to change my circle of friends that was conducive for where I was and not where I'm going. So it was a lot of transition, as we will get into.
Oh, yes.
Bringing me to where I am today.
And you have to go where you're celebrated, not tolerated.
Correct.
Right? Oh my goodness. Yeah. So jumping into transition, because it's difficult when you're in a place of transition to really trust that you can, number one, ever get out of it. Number two, survive it, and number three, have sanity in it, like the depression, the anxiety, the fear, all those things that come against you or at you while you're in that place of flux, that place of transition. So my first question is, for those who don't even recognize that they're in transition, they just feel like they're in hell. How do they really recognize this is temporary and it is just a state of transition that you're in and it's not your permanent state?
That's a really good question. The first thing I would say is wilderness is actually good. So a lot of times you think that, oh, I'm in the wilderness. There's a lot of wilderness examples in the Bible, and it lasted a lot longer than they wanted it to. And you say, when am I going to get out of it? When am I going to get out of it? And you're looking so much towards the destination that you're not really enjoying the process and the journey. Though it may be very difficult, as I can attest to, you have to realize that there's more pruning and more development in the process than in the destination. Because sometimes in this culture and in this environment we're in today, it's very microwave, as I'm sure we've all talked about. It's very now, 30 seconds, TikTok, short, let's go, beep, beep, can't wait when you're driving. You can't wait in a line anymore. You just want to go instant.
Oh my gosh, I was in so much traffic today and I'm like,
I know, you just want to get there. You just want to get there. And I think that God and my life has really slowed me down. If that's losing out on things, not getting what I want, there was all these like closed doors in my face that literally whatever I was trying to go to has stopped. And it had forced me to sit back and sit down and be still. And I think in the stillness and in the right support system is where I've seen the most growth. So I would say wilderness is actually good for a first step. And second, I would say seeking. So after you find out that you're like, I'm lost, I don't know what to do, what I'm doing is not working for me, you need to seek the right counsel. If that's a pastor, if that's a friend, if that's like me, just doing your own research, you have to see, what do I need? What tools, what resources?
A life coach like you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Find someone who you can talk to, number one, that relates to you. And it would help if they have gone through what you went through. It's so easy to say, oh, you're over that, or here's a scripture, or just read this book. But no one's going to understand, God forbid, like rape or incest or some hard things that people go through unless they have actually gone through them themselves. Like for me, childhood abuse. Yeah. And the last thing I would say is consistency. I think that's the hardest part, because when you know what you have to do, it's like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can change cities. I could try a new job. I can this. But a lot of times we jump around like popcorn, as I've heard that statement. And it's just like, we're trying this, we're going here, and we're searching, and we're like a hamster on a wheel, just going, working. And we're not going anywhere because there's no plan and there's no direction. So I would say having the right consistency towards the goal that you're seeking would be the last and most important thing that you should do in transition.
Wow. I heard recently a podcast, I don't remember the name of it, but he was saying that so many times we get into situations, back to what you were talking about a minute ago, that rescue me, like we're praying for God to rescue us out of this situation, when God just wants us to trust. He wants us to trust in that situation, to trust him. And what he said is like, rescue you? Are you kidding me? It just cost me $10,000 in 9 months to get you into this situation. What? He's like, it's like, I'm getting you into this situation so you can trust me to get you out. Because I needed to slow you down so that you can start counting on me instead of counting on yourself to get through it.
Correct.
And I thought that was really funny. I'm like, yeah. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm not going to rescue you like that. I just spent all this time setting you up in this situation so that you could trust me in it. And I know we're joking about it, but honestly, that's really how we can look at it, is that it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. It's happening for your growth, for your development, for you to help someone else. He wants us to be still and to trust him to help get us out of that situation. And when we're not trusting and we're trying to do it ourselves, that's when we get even into more difficult situations, and the depression and the anxiety and the unforgiveness and the pain and everything else that we go through trying to do this on our own, without trusting a higher power, a higher source to guide us through that process.
Yes, absolutely. And I would also add to that, that what you're saying about bitterness, it takes roots. When you have gone through some severe, traumatic, heartbreaking, painful, life-changing experiences, it's not something where you just wake up the next day and say, okay, I'm better. These are the scriptures I'm going to believe. These are the affirmations I'm going to believe. And it just happens right away. It's a process. It is a transition. So it takes time. You have to have the right support, but also you have to be gentle on yourself, which is something that I'm still learning. It's not going to be someone else's journey. It's going to be yours. And you have to love yourself and help yourself in the process. It took maybe 30 something, 40 something years for you to reach this point, probably thinking the wrong way, having the lies in your head, having the way that you grew up thinking the norm. It's not going to take 1 or 2 days to unprogram or reprogram or deprogram yourself to come into this new software that you're trying to live out. So it is a process. And I think the most important thing is remember that everyone's journey is different. What may be someone's journey may be longer, other people's journey may be shorter. You may have more of a lonely season. Someone else might be in a marriage season. Someone else might be in a parenting season. You know, you never know what God has for you. So just trust his timing and his process, and then go into the transition with an open heart and an open mind. And I think that's the best way you could come out better on the other side.
Yeah, and you said something very, very important in that, and you talked about programming. Like you said earlier, there are generations of programming. What your parents did, their parents probably did to them, who's their parents did to them, and their parents. So it's this deep, deep rooted way of treating someone, that you have now built up this belief that this is how I not just am treated, but deserve to be treated. And that programming is buried deep in your subconscious that you're not even aware of, but it acts out every day in different ways, whether it's in relationships with others, in how you deal at work with certain things. It comes out and you're not even sure. You're just like, well, that's just how I am. That's just how I am tends to be the normal excuse. Well, why are you that way? Or where did that come from? Have you really stopped to examine where did that come from, especially if it's toxic behavior?
Yes.
Because toxic behavior, they tend to like just excuse that as, well, that's just how I am.
And that's not how you have to be.
Exactly.
And that's not how you have to stay. So it really is a decision to be different. I think a lot of times when you come from a background like mine, it's very easy to point the finger. It's very easy to play the blame game. It's like, well, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know my parents. You don't know my family. And they might not. But there are people like Oprah and Tyler Perry and all these crazy transition stories that you hear about where people have come from, but you don't need to end up in that place. So you really have to decide mentally first before you do any physical action that I am going to be different and make that step towards the difference that you want to see.
And like you said, bitterness is a root of that. Well, that's just how I am. That's, you take it or leave it, swing in the head kind of thing. And it's not taking responsibility and accountability for your own behavior and your own actions and how it is affecting other people.
Yes.
That's why I love the 4 Agreements, the book, The 4 Agreements, because the first, be impeccable with your word and not to be offended, not to take everything personally.
I remember that one.
And to take responsibility, take responsibility for your own actions. When something happens, what was your part in that? What was your part in? And if there are apologies need to be made, make the apologies. Don't just decide, well, it's up to them to apologize. I'm fine. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to deprogram, like you said, and reprogram or even recognize. And that's why awareness is like one of the biggest tools that you can have, is to gain that personal self-awareness Because once you're aware of something, then you are responsible for changing it or keeping it the same. Now you're responsible. Now you're at choice. You could choose whether or not you want to stay like that and continue to be a butthead, or if you want to now be, like you said, be something different, because we all have that opportunity to change, no matter how old you are. Our brain, they've discovered, is the neuroplasticity of the brain. So an old dog can learn new tricks.
Yes, and I would even add to that as well. You always hear the saying, hurt people hurt people. But what about the saying, healed people heal people? We really have to change the trajectory of our thinking, because a lot of times, you can grow up and say, well, I was abused, I was this, I was that. But
Again,
the truth of the truth of the matter is, for my situation, I was also an abuser. I was very angry. I was very defensive. I was very hurt, and it would come out in my actions or my speech or how I would think of people and not give them the benefit of the doubt. And all people are the same. And no one likes me, and I'm not wanted. I'm rejected. I was abandoned. I'll keep being abandoned. You will stay in that same dark place as long as you allow yourself to. And it really takes a lot of digging and trying and inner work. It starts with your inner child, to go into the psychology of it. You can be a 35-year-old in a conference room and still behave like the 4-year-old that's inside of you. If that person did not, grow up. That person did not grow up in certain aspects. And sometimes it takes a harsh reality if you're not getting the self-awareness on your own, or someone else to tell you. Someone else might have to be like, hey, Alicia, this is not how you do things. I'm trying to love you here. And that's also the part of where you're ready to receive constructive criticism. You're ready to grow. You're ready to hear the things that you may not have heard before, that actually is not to offend you, but actually to develop you into the best you can be. So it really comes.
The hard things, not the abusive things. The harder things are to make that change and to decide that I am going to be different, because that comes with accepting constructive feedback from someone. That comes with listening with an ear of, how can I hear this to help me improve, rather than take it personally and be offended. So that is really when you start looking at your maturity and your ability to grow, rather than say that 4-year-old tantrum throwing grown up. You're a grown up in a 4-year-old. You're a grown up body in a 4-year-old mind, emotional mind. And that's why they call it emotional intelligence. We have to be able to recognize when we're acting out of that inner child, and say, you need to sit down. I have a friend who has, she's been on the show before, and she talks about going through a house and going through different rooms, like your emotional baggage. You go through these different rooms, and you have the little child in you who experienced this in a dark room, and you have to go open up the curtains, open up the windows, let the fresh air out, bring that child up and say, it's okay. We're okay now. You don't have to keep doing this, because you're safe and you're okay. And I thought that's really, it gives you a nice visual of, going back to that child that's in that darkness and in that fear state and in that rebellious state, because they're so fearful, and having them see that, no, look where we are now, it's okay. We're taking, you can relax now. You don't need to keep fighting. Anyway, so just before we wrap up for today, share any last tips that you have for people going through transition, in how they can really find that space of trust when they've been gaslighted. They don't know how to trust. They don't even know how to trust themselves.
I would say, coming to this point of my transition and my journey, a lot of steps has helped me along the way. One of them is writing. Writing and public speaking are my two greatest talents and abilities. I actually wrote my autobiography. It's called Fight. It's on Amazon. And it's really a deep dive into abuse, into what I've been through and how I came out of it. God was definitely the number one factor there. Another way is, like I said, seek the right resources. So for example, not only do I write, but I teach classes. And one of the main classes that I teach is purpose, abandonment, rejection. I have a feelings class, how to even feel. What are you feeling? You know, can you even identify it? Are you really angry, or is it really hurt underneath that anger? So identifying the right emotion and feeling in that. And my main masterclass is abuse. I feel, and in my book, I talk a lot about this, even have the hyperlinks, because you don't want to just hear the word physical abuse. You want to know exactly what it is. And I go into a deep dive about what abuse is and what you could recognize that maybe you have been through in your life. I think finding the right resources and the right support and the right help through the wilderness and through the hard times is what will bring you out of it. Venting, speaking, counseling, learning, growing, getting the right support, but most of all, deciding, as we said, in yourself that you want to be better and you want this transition to be a positive one. People could go through negative transitions. You get a cancer diagnosis, you lose your job. You know, you're always going through transition in your life. But the transition I'm talking about is the better you, the best version of you, who you want to become, and how do you get there? So I would say trust God first, seek the right counsel, decide you want to do better, go towards your goals step by step, day by day, and be consistent.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Those are very actionable steps. So tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, because if they are in transition and they resonate with everything that you said here today and they want to know more or seek out your master classes or even get your book, how can they get in touch with you?
I am on social media handles. I'm on Alloysa on LinkedIn, also Alloysa444 on IG, Alloysa.com, Alloysa at Hotmail, send me an email. I'm here at your service, helping you through transition.
And Alloysa is Alloysa if you're listening and not watching. So you can go check out everything, all the resources that Alloysa has on transition and overcoming trauma. Again, she is a life coach, especially around overcoming trauma, to help you be the best you that you can be. So you mentioned feelings, just as we close, you mentioned feelings, and feelings can be so muddled. So I think that's a really important class that you have there to help people really disseminate, because fear can manifest in all kinds of different ways. Your anger can manifest in all kinds of different ways. But what is at the root of it to help dig that up and dig that out, help, again, transition you from that child that has been hurt so badly that just wants to, now as an adult and you have power over yourself, you want to take control and you don't want to forgive and you don't, you're so angry all the time, but the root of it was that childhood pain that you went through. So disseminating those feelings is really a big part of understanding where you are in transition, because then once you've identified those feelings, I think trust can start to come in, because you've really lost your foundation of trust when you're angry and when you're hurt and you don't understand your feelings.
And also, we live in a society that it's like, oh, manage your emotions and control your emotions, and women are too emotional. When the fact is, God created us to be emotional beings. He flipped over tables. He cried. So it's like even Jesus had emotion. And I think that that's part of it that we don't understand. It's not that the emotion is wrong. It's putting the right emotion in the right context. If you're really angry, are you really angry? You're always lashing out, always fighting someone. But like I said, it might be hurt. It might be pain. It may be abandonment. Getting to the root issue of your issues is what helps you grow. So putting the right context with the right emotion, and even realizing, like I do in my class, what emotion am I really feeling? There are a plethora of emotions versus happy and sad and angry. You know, you could be elated, you could be content, you could be disappointed is another big one, you know, that you didn't get the job you wanted, you didn't get the spouse you wanted, you didn't get the car you wanted, whatever it is. There's grief, you know, there's so many things that you feel that sometimes you're not able to navigate. So the mini,
so I think that's a really powerful class. I'm laughing because you know, when you're trying to decipher your emotions, sometimes what you're feeling, you're saying that it's one thing, and it's really, like, for instance, when people say I'm so anxious about something, when they really mean they're eager and they're excited for it, but they're saying they're anxious, but anxious is a negative emotion that they're attaching to a positive thing. So sometimes even identifying it correctly is a challenge, because you know, you're saying you're anxious when you're really eager, and that, or excited, and so that's how easily people could mislabel their emotions.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Alloysa, I thank you so much. We are out of time today, and this has been a tremendous conversation, and we've had to wrestle with some tech issues along the way, but I just so thank you for joining us today and sharing your brilliance with our audience.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for having me. I really had a good time. And remember, transition is not always a bad thing. It could bring you out brighter on the other side.
Yes, and I want to encourage you all to be bold, to be brave, even in transition, and every day do one thing to step out with audacious confidence. Until next time, this is Alicia Couri saying goodbye for another episode of Unleash Your Audacious Confidence.